You're out over the left shoulder, other side. Sorry,
Other left?
I'm reversed.
I'm reversed. You're fine. I'm reversed.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay, we're good. Okay, cool. Am I recording? God, this would be terrible if I didn't have all this stuff running yet. Okay, I think we're good. I see recording there. Okay, cool. Brendan Eder, it's very good to meet you, man.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, my pleasure, man. First of all, I think your album is brilliant.
Thanks so much, man.
And I have lots of questions, and I'm talking about to mix with time. First of all, I want to hear about your background a little bit, because one of the reasons I connected with the album so early is I'm a Frank Zappa fan. So like the first time I listened through it, I'm like, this guy's nailing like early 70s Frank Zappa, Waka Jawaka era stuff, you know. Then come to find out later on that was really a big influence on you.
Yeah, but I don't really list Frank Zappa as like the biggest influence, but it's then again the music it's kind of like the first comparison you could make at the same time. Yeah. So it is kind of bizarre that how that kind of played out.
Your background, your first instrument, let's say you play drums in your ensemble. That's your primary thing. Is that your training as an ensemble, as a percussionist?
I have a broad sort of undergraduate education, so I did drums and studied some composition and also recording engineering. All those things I've actually been almost equally interested in for kind of since I started making music.
Yeah. And when did you start making music?
Typical like early teens. 11 or 12 or something. I was futzing around on piano and drum set. Family members that had drums. So I'd mess around, and ultimately I was fortunate enough to get my hands on my own drum kit.
Was just you were exposed to a lot of music, or did you have some formal training?
Yeah, in the my early childhood. I mean, just the typical thing, I did maybe a year, maybe 2 years of piano lessons my parents got me. Mm-hmm. So sort of the run-of-the-mill kind of thing. Really wasn't until high school that I actually think that I started taking music more seriously and, had some, enrolled in some jazz band, things like that in high school. Felt kind of deeply in love with music then.
Yeah.
So beforehand, I wasn't like a lot of these people that we see out there that, kind of just completely lived music and were immersed in their craft, from a really young age.
So, but you're playing some in jazz bands and stuff like that, playing some drums essentially. And what were you listening to in your personal habits, like?
Yeah, you mentioned something about having some influences. I think that my dad did play a role at the time that I was really falling in love with music. Some of it was through old tapes that he had. He didn't necessarily play them that much anymore, but he has a musical background. And I think that played a role because I was literally just like digging through tapes as I was, becoming more and more interested in music, and there was just good stuff. Lots of classical music, mainly. So I was listening to when I was really getting into things, early 20th century classical music and jazz. I didn't go too deep right away. I still haven't, but so those things, and then punk music, and I love like Fugazi. I also love Aphex Twin a lot. So all those things, played a role.
It's interesting because I saw on your Twitter feed a little while back you posted about, I think somebody said something, what's one band you could talk about for 30 minutes or something, and the first thing you said was Fugazi.
Hell yeah!
But it's interesting to me, like you've got this background with listening and being exposed to a lot of maybe classical music through recordings and stuff, but also personally being influenced with much more contemporary music sources, like Fugazi and Aphex Twin. And I particularly find the Aphex Twin influence interesting. Because I think I saw in another interview where you were like, I started listening to some more serious stuff, like Aphex Twin. And like, I thought you would be like, like Varese, like Stravinsky.
Yeah.
So the best example, of course, is you have the cover of Number 20 on
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that album. There's a lot of nuance to the way you did that arrangement.
Yeah, yeah, not too bad. I mean, I think that one's pretty straightforward, but there's nuance in the performance and
Hmm.
the bassoon solo. That's a solo, not a written solo. So Amber Wyman is a bassoonist who played on that longtime member of the ensemble. She, I think, kind of really elevated that recording with her bassoon solo.
Clearly, lots of it is written out. I got your CD, you sent it to me, and it came with a nice little doodle on the front with like I think a
Hell
penguin,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
and then but it was printed on some sheet music. I'm like, oh, cool. He sent some sheet music, and I looked at it. I'm like, wait, this is his sheet music.
yeah.
Oh, oh,
Yeah, yeah, man. I really go for it. I really notate the shit out of my music. It's kind of the only way to pull it off without really having people kind of co-writing and being regular members of the band anyway. I really got to just, you know, pencil it
yeah.
on paper and then leave some room where I can take risks and you know, where the music can really truly benefit from people coming up with their own ideas.
Mhm.
Yeah, for the most part, I'd say it's through composed.
I didn't really know that bassoon solo was improv. So that's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true though because sometimes I write solos, so
Mhm. Right.
they could sound like they're improvised, but then they're written or partially they're notated, and then it breaks out into half of it is maybe a genuine solo. But yeah, she did that one. I didn't write anything for her to solo.
It's in that Rite of Spring range too, where it's like it almost doesn't have a bassoon sound. It almost starts to sound like an English horn. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. She's damn good. That's why.
that's that's impressive. It's impressive, and it's also
Yeah,
interesting. There's other parts of the album. I think there's another one, Riv or RIV,
Riv.
uh,
Yeah,
right,
I
Riv,
call it Riv.
where
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's saxophone solo in that one. Uh,
Hmm.
is there an improvised saxophone solo in that one, or is that one written out too?
Yeah, yeah. At the end, we break out into this jam that's it's quoting "On the Corner," the Miles
Right.
Davis
All right.
piece. The groove from that. Dun, dun, ba-dun, dun, 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 dun.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then he quotes. I have him quote the melody, and then yeah, then he goes ham and does a solo. That one's got a Stravinsky quote on it too. That one quotes Petrushka.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
true.
Nice.
Yeah, I like that piece.
Some instruments improv naturally a little bit differently than others.
Yeah,
Like, for example, in Soft Shine Hot, there's a track right beforehand, you've got a bassoon solo in there. Now, that one sounds to me kind of like an improvised solo. Is that one improvised?
Yes. So
Uh,
Soft Shine Hop, yeah. Towards the end, I wrote this sort of section that we repeated, and when we do it live, we sort of, if we even rehearse, it's like, okay, well, you do one time, and then you do
right.
two times through, and then we'll just play the actual notes and end it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the recording, Soft Shine Hop, yeah, has another genuine bassoon solo. That's a different
Yeah.
bassoonist, actually.
The difference between letting a bassoon player rip and letting a
Yeah,
saxophone rip.
totally different. You're gonna get some
Yeah,
different
totally
results.
different aesthetic. I saw you have a video for in the Spirit of that first track. In that video, you're just following the score, and I was really impressed with because I also had played some bass, and so I was really impressed with the bass line that because it sounds so natural. It sounds like something that a
Yeah.
bass player would just jam.
Yeah, I have a bass, so I kind of test things out, make sure it's playable. I have to do that with everything, really. But the bass line is like, okay, this is, you know, you could play this all day, no problem.
One of the things I like about a lot of your compositions is that the easy thing to do would just be to write a clever melody and then harmonize it. Now you don't do that. You've got a lot of parts and layers going on in what you have going on.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. And coming from a band director, that makes a lot of sense because, with a lot of band music, big band music, things like that, you're harmonizing the lead line, and it sounds fucking awesome. I never learned how to do that, to be honest,
Yeah.
until maybe like 2 days ago. I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of knew, but I haven't in practice done that. So I haven't utilized it with the ensemble much. Maybe sometimes I'll harmonize a run, or a line,
Yeah.
sort of in rhythmically in unison, I guess you would call
Yeah.
it. But I do this interwoven kind of everything's its own line.
Yeah.
which probably drives some people crazy that are used, like maybe you,
Yeah, no,
in a
well,
good
not
way.
really. Yeah, I think it's interesting to be honest. I mean, you do have some straightforward melodies in there, and that's fine. If it was all just that the whole time, it'd be a little trickier. But you're good about having something that you can grab onto, and then maybe having things that are a little bit more esoteric, you know. And I
Yeah,
say esoteric
thanks.
like not that it's not esoteric hard to catch on to, just not straightforward. Here's the melody
Yeah,
ham-fisted.
yeah. Even if it's like getting kind of wacky. I mean, there's some other pieces I've written that are more out there, but in general, I feel like I kind of go for like this groove based thing, and that makes kind of any idea more accessible. You can still latch on.
You have some pieces on here that like border on being almost ambient.
Yeah,
But I don't think they're, in my opinion anyway, they're not really ethereal enough to be ambient. They're more just like texture, you know?
yeah, yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, the Aphex Twin cover is pretty ambient, obviously, but like there's some other stuff in there that's um, it's sort of ambient classical or something. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's not like you can just space out and keep listening to it and like nothing's going on. It's like it's a little too much to be ambient,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I think though, and getting back to the Aphex Twin cover, it it comes from that ambient line that he was doing. But I think that arrangement brings out the inherent melodies that are in that. It feels less ambient to me in the arrangement
Yeah,
that you have.
yeah, yeah. You're right.
It's what it feels like. I listened to the original version, and it feels more like the wallpaper music. And I don't mean that in a
Exactly.
bad way, but that's the intent behind a lot of ambient music. It's supposed to be kind of like the furniture music, or whatever they want to call it. Things that's
Yeah,
just
Eric Satie,
yeah,
furniture
yeah,
music. He coined
yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah, totally.
On the other hand, a lot of your other stuff, especially the kind of more funky, the contrasting pieces, have a real kind of playful nature to it. That's great. I mean, I sat here and just like wrote out, adjective after adjective. It's like
Oh man,
playful, angular. It has a kind of a positive feel to it that I think
yeah,
is kind of missing in some ways. That's what I think is really refreshing about it.
man. Thanks.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. I just kind of end up that way a lot of the time. Maybe no
Yeah.
matter what I'm going through in my own personal life, it's a lot of the music it just kind of I end up writing and putting down as yeah, kind of just funky, whimsical
Yeah. That's it. What is it called?
thing. Yeah, yeah. Still not quite sure why that is, but yeah, who knows?
It's expression of you for sure. I think. Um, the Brendan Eder Ensemble. This is like a set instrumentation that you're going to kind of you see as like an ongoing project.
Yes, more or less. It is tricky because I do like other instruments too, but yeah, I mean, I've been pretty loyal to these instruments for a number of years now. I've been operating this ensemble for like 5 years,
Yeah.
and maybe more, probably more now. And I really like it, and I have a big body of music, so it's kind of my go-to. It's definitely my go-to, but I also like adding guitar and a percussionist. I have a lot of our charts I've since added those instruments, and I also have some of these compositions and other music that I've been starting to do live for more like a quintet with
I see.
upright bass and sax and guitar, drum set, and yeah, clarinet, whatever it is.
See.
So it's changing a
That
little, but
sounds that sounds a little more like a. Are you still keeping the same kind of funk rock aesthetic, or it sounds a little more jazzy when you get into that stand up, especially the
uh,
stand up bass.
yeah, yeah, I'll say I think so. Yeah, it's most of that stuff is and you'll hear this upcoming album. I'll send it to you too if I haven't already. It's a lot more kind of straightforward,
Hmm.
but I'm not turning my back on the aesthetic of the ensemble.
Yeah.
And to mix with time, I really want to keep. plan on keeping that up and
Yeah,
taking it further.
I think it's super successful. I think you can do. There's a lot of potential there. I mean, clearly,
Potential, yeah.
You have a couple of guest artists on the album, right?
Mm.
They come on and sing vocals on the first track, or I believe Al Ratner, I believe, who plays guitar on the second track. Do you write, when you're writing these, you're like, well, I'm going to write this for this guy, or you have guitar like, are you looking at those people like, I'm going to write this part for this person, or you write a guitar part and, because if you have the ensemble set, like, how do you know when to augment?
Yeah, so it's not always the same people. So I tend to not write for people specifically too much because I don't have that luxury. And if I did, I wouldn't write as much. I'd probably try to lean in a more collaborative, more open kind of direction. But the like Adam Ratner, the guitarist, he's a good friend of mine. So he's the only person I would, and he's freaking awesome guitarist. So he's super good. So yeah, I mean, I was just like, oh man, that'd be awesome if Adam could play on this. And so that was actually after the fact of recording that. I'm like, how can I make this song better? And so I actually we added guitar together. And for the vocals on the Spirit of, those are two of my friends. They're not classical singers. They don't, music notation or anything. Colleen Green, who's putting out an awesome record in September, she's like a punk rock and roll singer, artist. But she's hella good, so she was able to just, I basically mocked up MIDI and played it back in my apartment. She just like started knocking out these lines.
The beauty of this whole project is because it's clearly like has its roots in some classical, I hate to say classical, it's not really the right word, chamber orchestral type music, But then
some type of music like that, yeah. I don't know either.
Which is actually interesting. This year, for some reason, the music I listened to this year, I've come up with a lot of these kind of more often these hybrid rock classical albums that a larger ratio this year than I have in the past, which is cool. Like, and your album was the first one. Like, beginning of this year was when I keyed my ear open to it, and I've been catching more of them recently. So I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of that crossover, the blending of the dissolution of genres, really.
Dissolution of genres, is that what we said?
Yeah.
Interesting. I like that.
Opinion, soapbox. I went through a whole phase when I worked in record stores. And back then, genre was really important because you had to know what bin to go to.
Yeah.
Totally. And if you're like, so like Living Colour, the band Living Colour, they had to put a label on their album like, don't put us in the soul section.
Damn. What do they want? Rock?
Well, yeah, they're a rock band. They did Colt's personality. That's it. But back in like '89, you see an African American guy on the top, like, oh, we're going to put that over here. So now that's different. Your music is only what Windows Media says it is when you bring it up.
Yeah.
So you have all these little micro genres, or really the fact that genres are starting to kind of melt and blend in a way that wasn't as possible when you had record bins and people trying to sell records out of record bins. Yeah.
I guess that has changed. Have you seen the what's that website? It's not like Musical Tree. It's it's that genre sort of. They use Spotify to generate this stuff. It's got all these crazy subgenres. Fourth wave. I guess it's not that crazy.
Okay.
I wish I could remember what it's called. Every Noise at Once.
Okay, I've seen that.
Really interesting, and you can look up artists or just browse around on there, and you'll see all sorts of relationships. Mm-hmm. And I forget how I found it, but I looked up my own band on there, of course, and it was really interesting. And other artists I look them up. It's like, oh, fourth wave or modern chamber music, but you see all these bands and artists that are listed like on this floating plane. Really, it's like that's what the modern record box would look like. It'd be like a
Yeah.
floating plane in space where nothing, it's like all floating in between genres and has all these sub things. It's like this really, yeah, things have things have really spread out. But you can always just summarize and just be like rock, whatever, here's
Yeah.
jazz.
Whenever the '90s grunge came out, I'm like, guys, it's just rock.
Yeah.
It's just rock. They don't want to call it that because that's what your parents listen to, but it's rock. It's fine.
Yeah.
Especially if
Yeah.
you start talking to like the metal guys. Guys into black metal, they have all like black metal and death metal, and they're different. And you don't mix them up. You talk to those
I
folks.
feel like maybe like the metal folks like kind of divided up into subgenres before anyone else, maybe. Before
I think you might be right.
maybe it's like where that kind of really took off.
It could be.
Like the
That's an
obscene
interesting
amount
idea.
of genres. I wonder if that's true.
Maybe.
I mean, obviously, like jazz was, jazz back in the day. We had hard bop, we had all these things, and cool jazz, but it wasn't like it didn't get like metal became where it's like black metal, blah blah blah, death metal, grunge, whatever.
And then we were talking a little bit about Miles Davis a second ago. Like whenever he makes Bitches Brew, and you have this whole jazz fusion line of thinking that happens throughout the '70s with Weather Report and all those bands.
Yeah.
And like, are they even jazz? It gets to a point where it's like Weather Report was so written out. It's almost borders on.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. Yeah. That's something I struggle with the genre of jazz. There is a writer that who's going to write about me actually, and I looked him up and I saw that I can't really recall exactly what it was, but it was like what jazz is the great thing about jazz is that it's all improvised, and the spirit of jazz is all about that improvisation. Basically, that's what I read, or he said, or he was talking about. And obviously it's not like an original idea, but and
that's a big component, though.
I struggle with that. I think that it's time to figure that out once and for all.
Yeah.
Where does it end? Because look, you have big band arrangements and swing music, like we're super through composed, Duke Ellington, whatever, and you have tons of jazz music that was through composed at the same time as super improvised, avant-garde, whatever jazz,
right.
Where there's not a single note. So I think it can be both.
Yeah, Count Basie Live at the Sands. Great classic album with Frank Sinatra singing, right?
Yeah.
And I argue that this is really just a pop album. I mean, there's not that much improv on it. It's a pop album from like 1940 to 1950, from that time frame.
He's like, it's still jazz, asshole.
yeah, exactly. But it's the Basie band. How could you say that? I'm like, but there's like this much improv, and even Frank Sinatra's not really improvising that much. He's singing the tune straight down because he wrote the songs,
Yeah.
And swing and and so
yeah.
Even then it starts to break down some.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, all these genres, like we were getting at, they kind of break down anyway. The more you think about it,
all melts,
you basically
it all
drive
down.
Yeah, it all melts down into music. You'll drive yourself insane if you keep trying to. I don't know what's the use in all those genres anymore.
I completely agree.
just no more record bins, please. No, there still exists though. So
you have a new project coming out, and is this with the Ensemble?
It's actually not. There's one player in it that has played with Ensemble a lot. It's called Cod Cottage. It's a concept album about a dentist named Edward Blankman who wrote elegant minimalist jazz in obscurity.
This is a real person?
No, I created Edward Blankman and his story. The concept album also has it's going to be on gatefold vinyl, which I'm very excited about. It's got pictures of the session, but we did them in a way so that nothing could be dated to current times. And so down to the microphones or the license plates on the car in the background, tried to make it look like it's from the 70s. I built the story and the concept and then I got this Wurlitzer. I started writing music on it, and basically this idea happened more or less, and I just kept going and ran with it, and I really went far. And the idea that I became obsessed with getting Light in the Attic Records to release it, but they weren't able to release it. But I did meet with them and everything, and been in touch with those guys ever since. But so it's taken me a while to release it because once I figured once I couldn't get a label to release it anonymously and do the full on concept, I had to release it myself.
I see.
So,
I got you. Cool. That's really cool.
yeah, it's cool. I like it. It's really nice sounding. Quite different from To Mix with Time. I definitely.
Yeah.
It was scary putting it out under the Ensemble name because it is an ensemble, and I'm making all the music again and notating everything. But aesthetically, it's so different. It was kind of a leap of faith.
And that's going to be a full release that's coming out when?
Cod Cottage out on September 10th. Yeah, this summer.
Cool. I'm really happy to have had a chance to talk to you about this.
Dude, likewise. I really liked the videos you put up and the review you put up. It's really, really awesome.
Well, thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and what can you tell me what you've been up to since you've hit all your questions with your directing and everything?
Well, I'm actually in the midst of a big move. My wife got a job at Appalachian State University, and so I'm moving from Texas to North Carolina the next month.
Oh, that's cool.
That's exciting.
Is that why the left shelf is empty?
Yeah, exciting. That's why the left shelf is empty.
Right,
yes.
yeah.
Whenever I frame this, you won't see it. But yeah, and this is actually this will be the last one I do with this background. I bought a green screen for myself so I can go on the road.
Oh, good. Nice.
Yeah. So you won't see me going from the closet. like a hotel room closet talking about whatever. Well, I'm about to run out of time here for talk, although I've had a great time talking to you, especially we kind of got off on a genre discussion there, which I like.
Yeah, that was cool. Really appreciate it.
Will do. All right. Thank you so much, man.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.